Welcome. As usual, we'll be waiting just a few minutes to let folks join in on the Zoom meeting. We all have those new laptops that we approved a while back, so please excuse us if some of the board members are fiddling with technology at the moment as we get started. All set? And I'll call this meeting of the Southwood Beach School Board to order. First, we will move on to the land acknowledgement with Director Jackson. Marnie.
Thank you. Southwood Beach School District begins by acknowledging that we gather on the ancestral homelands, originally known as Chekolchi, in the Shutsied of the Coast Salish peoples, on the lands of the Lower Skagit, Tulalip, Swinomish, Snohomish, Stillaguamish, and Suquamish, who have lived in the Salish Sea Basin since time immemorial, who have hunted, fished, and gathered here, and who have taken care of these lands. We respect their sovereignty and their right to self-determination, and we honor their sacred spiritual connections with the land and water. Please join us in expressing our deepest respect for the Indigenous people of this territory and our gratitude for their enduring care and protection of this land, which we currently occupy and share through the Treaty of Point Elliott, signed by 82 tribes in Mukilteo on January 22nd, 1855. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll just to note that this is slightly different than our usual meetings because we have a budget hearing in the middle of the meeting. So there will be a period to speak specifically for or against items on the budget immediately following Mr. Pullman's presentation and immediately before consent agenda and the general public comments. So if you have comments about items on the budget, we'll cue you here if you're in person, or if you're on the Zoom, please drop your name and location in there to let us know you have a question and then start typing it up. Are there any, do I hear any objections to approving the agenda and minutes as presented? Hearing none, the agenda and minutes as presented are approved. Mr. Pullman, I turn it over to you for the budget presentation.
So we are looking at the 22-23 budget. And since we spent quite a bit of time a couple of weeks ago on this, I will just hit the highlights as we go through, unless you have questions. All the documentation is on the website if anybody's interested in looking at that. We're going to do 5 funds. When we talk about the budget: general fund, capital projects, debt service, ASB, and transportation. 5 parts of developing a budget has to do with student enrollment, which generates revenue, staffing, needs, expenditures, and a fund balance. State apportionment: the budget we create is an estimate. We will be paid by the state for the first 4 months based on those estimates, and then it will actually be trued up in January based on actual enrollment. It may go up or down depending upon what we actually have. Enrollment: Talk about enrollment, talk about students driving funding. First, we look at our historical, and you can see in the 80s and 90s, we were a district that was growing dramatically. And then from 2000 on, we have been going in the other direction. And it's important to look at that as we try to project what the enrollment is for the coming year. And just a quick 5-year breakdown. And you can kind of see by looking at that, the pattern. The larger kindergartens that became smaller over time, the larger, classes that became smaller as you get into high school. So it gives you the idea of what we're looking at. On student enrollment, you can see what our average is for the last 2 years and budget for this year and budget for next year. Again, it's about 1,048 kids in our basic education program and another 64 in our ALE program. And we can break that down by building and grade, which we need to do in order to figure out what our staffing needs are. So for funding purposes, we are using the following numbers. For basic education, we are estimating that we're going to have 1,047.59 FTE. FTE is a full-time equivalent, a student that goes 5 days a week, all day. In the alternative learning program, about 64.16 FTE. Special education, about 181 students. Running Start, 27. Vocational at the high school, 62, and bilingual, 6. And those will generate the revenue through the OSBI process. And for each of those programs, there's a dollar amount that is the equivalent of a 1.0 roughly. And it's about $10,482 for basic ed, a little less for special ed, about $1,000 less for ALE, and vocational is about the same. On the revenue side, we have 5 main sources of revenue. We have local property taxes, we have local district generated funds, state apportionment, state funding for categorical programs, which are special programs, and federal funding. You look at that, about 75% of our funding comes from the state through the apportionment process, which is through enrollment funding. About 10% is federal funds, and about 19% comes from the local community. Local levy fund used for a lot of different purposes. Some of the examples is our athletic programs, underfunding at the state level, food service expenditures, transportation expenditures, things we negotiate that is not paid for by the state, et cetera. Our enrichment levy for the next fiscal year is $3,448,245. So that's the amount of money we will levy and have property taxes pay for. We are limited to a per student amount rather than a rate per thousand. And it just has to do with the calculations and the way the state has set up their formulas. And you can see that our levy collection has been very flat for the last 4 years, has dropped down after the McCleary decision where they changed the formula where we were on a rate per thousand. We also have revenue that is locally generated in the school district, donations, rental fees, food service fees, student fees, et cetera. It's about $581,400. You can see that's substantially more than the previous 2 years when we were basically not operating in person, but less than it was in 1920, which was the actual amount. So we're building back towards where we were before. State apportionment based on the prototypical school funding model. They use enrollment to determine the number of staff they fund. Then they use a staff dollar amount, multiply that out, and that creates a dollar amount that we would receive. Staffing units are divided into 3 different classifications: certificated instructional staff, classified staff, and administrative staff. And the state does that for their funding formulas because they fund them at different levels. See that for a certificated instructional staff, we will receive $88,728. For a classified staff, $61,564, and administrative staff, $127,387. So just a different way how things are funded. Based upon those enrollment numbers, we come up with our state funding, and the top part is our general apportionment for basic education, special education. It's about $11,938,000. The remainder is state special purpose funds, $3,101,000, and that is for things like special education, LAP, which is learning assistance, highly capable, and a variety of other programs that are in there. Those categorical programs are funds that has to be spent in those specific programs. And if they don't, then there is a retrievement process from the state. The federal purpose is a lot like the state special purpose funds, except it's federal money. You can see that it's $2,162,085, which is about twice what we normally would have seen in 1920 before ESSER came along. More than half of the funds that we will spend this year in federal funds are ESSER funds, and it will be the last year that we will have those. So those will disappear a year from now, which means there's $1 million less revenue coming in 23-24 than we're seeing in 22-23. Again, funds have to be spent in each of those programs in specific areas based upon the grant itself and what is defined by the federal government. So if we look at all our funding sources, you see that we have total revenues of $21,230,991, very similar to the budget in the current year. We move into the expenditure side of it, and we can look at expenditures by program and type. We went through the program, so I will just go to object code, which is kind of the big picture look at expenditures. And this is going to be salaries, benefits, supplies, purchase services, travel. And you can see what the budget looks like in each of those. So for certificated salaries, it's $9,473,992, about 42% of our total budget. The classified salaries at $4,045,412 is close to 18%. And the employee benefits and federal taxes are $5,364,167, or roughly 24% of our total budget. And then supplies are a little over 5%, 11% for purchase services, and about 0.13 of that is for travel. So that comes to $22,549,066. And if you remember, our revenue is a little over 21 million. So there's a differential between our expenditures and our revenue, which we'll be taking out of fund balance. We also get funding from the state for MSOCs, that's materials, supplies, and other services, or supplies, service, travel, et cetera, of $1,492,150. We budgeted $1,508,083. It's only program 1 and 97, program 1, 2 and 97. So we're using about $16,000 in local funds, and it's just a requirement that I tell you that. The other funds that we're budgeting, capital projects fund, this is for the repair of buildings and also for modernization of technology. We're looking at revenue of $2,977,000. Most of that is from property taxes. The local non-tax support is going to be interest income, and the $715,000 is a federal grant we have that we are currently involved with the community center doing a retrofit. On the expenditure side, we're going to spend $3.6 million on buildings and $1,250,000 on technology. We're also transferring $88,250 to the debt service fund, which we'll mention. And we'll expect to end with a fund balance of $38,750, assuming we get all the projects done that and the projects we're working on. So there's $2,450,000 for improvement of buildings. There's $1,150,000 to finish up the FEMA grant at the community center, which is the retrofit of the, and then $1,250,000 to spend on technology. Debt service fund, this is repayment of a loan to the state of Washington for energy retrofits that we did several years ago. Since there is no bonds in this district, those have been paid off. The only way to finance this is through the capital projects fund, and has to be paid out of the debt service fund. It's a requirement by the state. So we are transferring $88,250 to make those payments. You notice our balance is $165,000. We started with a almost $800,000 loan. We will pay $80,000 off principal this year and another $8,250 on principal. And then the following year, 23-24, the loan will actually be paid off and will no longer be transferring. ASB fund. ASB revenue and expenditures is broken into 5 different categories: general, student body, athletics, classes, clubs, and private money. The revenue and expenditure is budgeted basically neutral for both of those. And the thing you have to mention with ASB is this is not a budget you can spend unless you generate the revenue. It's generated by the students and spent by the students. So there is no funding for this from anything other than what the students generate. So even though we have a budget of 160,000, they might only generate $20,000 in revenue and spend $20,000. And then the Transportation Vehicle Fund, this is for the purchase of the large yellow school buses. We are budgeting about $90,000 in reimbursements from the state for the buses that are in the depreciation schedule. We expect to buy a bus. So we're going to budget 239,000. The buses are closer to 160,000 reality. And then our beginning balance, we should have about 150,000 at the end of August because that's when we get our normal payment. But we will basically spend what we have to purchase buses, and then anything we have left over carries over the following year. Along this line, I also put in an application for an electric school bus through EPA today. We do qualify because of our location. We are considered rural because we are a certain distance away from an area. So the application is in. Hopefully we'll see that come through if we do $5,000 grant and possible $20,000 for the infrastructure in order to put a charging station and those types. Should know later in the fall when that comes through.
If we do put in a charging station, would it be an option to expand it so that maybe employees who have electric vehicles or other people could also charge?
Not know the answer to that.
Okay.
Being it's in the transportation facility, it'd be really difficult to have people coming in and charging in there. So I would think probably not. But it's something we can look into. I really don't know what the details are on what that infrastructure looks like, or if it's a specific, I'm assuming it's going to be very specific to buses as far as what plugs into it.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if we're already running electrical, if we already have electricians out, it might be an opportunity to look at whether there's a need or a desire to add on to it, especially if.
My concern would be having them in the transportation office with our
Yeah.
fuel tanks and equipment and trucks going in and out. We
Yeah,
have,
that
It's
makes
also,
sense.
there will be a fee. So employees charging their vehicles, there would have to be some way to offset the cost of the electricity that would require. But it's certainly something that, even if we put them at the various buildings, they have coin operated out in the world. So there's still, there's the possibility of that. We haven't had the demand yet, but I know we can't just allow people to plug in.
No, that part makes sense to me. I'm just thinking if we're, given how
already building
difficult
it,
it can
yeah.
be to get certain services or things done, if we're already building it, if
Yep.
there's an opportunity or a need, I would be interested in learning what it might take to expand it.
it would be difficult in the location we're going to have them because we do close gates every day and, but we can certainly look into it if we get the grant. And then just the budget summary that has the revenue and expenditure, and you look under general fund, you can see that our revenue is less than expenditures. Yes, and we're going to spend $1,318,075 of fund balance. Our fund balance is about $5.3 million, or is expected to be at that time. So we still will have almost $4 million in fund balance left. But again, it's that we need, and we talked about this, we need to look at the fact that we have to reduce expenditures to balance, because once the fund balance is drawn down, we have no way of balancing without having that. So we also do a 4-year budget requirement. And again, it's a shot in the dark when you start getting out more than a year. So I'll tell you what it is, maybe. So we look at the enrollment, and the expectation is, unless something changes based on the demographics and the consensus information we have, that we will continue to see smaller kindergarten classes coming in. And as those smaller classes come in, the larger classes graduate out. It looks like we will continue to. And what that basically does is it just flatlines our revenue, because even if IPD increases by 2%, if we have 60 fewer kids at $10,000 each, that's $600,000 is probably a greater loss there than it is in the IPD increase that we'd received. The other thing I want to point out is that on the federal special purpose, the $2.1 million this year, expect that to drop back because of the ESSER funds to, under dollars in the coming year. So again, and then the expenditures on here are targeted expenditures. And in order to get to that, you see that there is a budget reduction required in each of those years in order to get to that. Again, that's assuming that nothing changes with regionalization, funding formulas, enrollment, all the things that can affect what we have to do. Even when we look at that, you still see that there's a fund balance usage in that line that says contribution to and from fund balance, but it decreases over time so that eventually by the time we get to 4 years out, we have that balanced budget. A gradual process of getting there, and unless something changes in the funding formulas or something else changes. Capital Projects Fund, it's basically that we get $2,250,000 a year from the levy, and we expect to spend that on buildings and technology over the course of the year. The very last column, there's only $952,000, and that's because levies are on a calendar year. So you pay your taxes in the spring, you pay it in the fall. We are in a fiscal year, and that splits that calendar year in half. So we get out to the end of it, it's the end of our levy. I'm assuming there'll be another levy in there, but I'm not going to make that in this type of projection because nobody has voted on it yet, right? But you see that difference at the end. Debt service fund, again, 2 more years, roughly $88,000 payments in each of those years. Capital Projects Fund. ASB, just a simple movement of the same dollar amount, assuming we get a little smaller, maybe a little less revenue and expenditure over time. Transportation Vehicle Fund, just looking at our depreciation schedule, adding some buses in at different points, which changes the amount we receive from the state, and looking at how much we have. So we can buy buses next year. The following year, we won't be able to. The following, 2 years. Trying to figure out what that schedule looks like. That's all the information I have for budget. So if there are any questions.
I have a question about revenue. Why do special ed students get a slightly smaller amount of money per FTE than general ed?
Well, really they don't, because they get both, right? So they're a basic ed student and they're a special ed student. And it's just the formulas that, actually it's the state legislators, not OSBI, set up on how they fund that. Each year or each 2 years, in a biennial budget, they create these dollar amounts that says based on these categories, they're going to fund them at these levels.
Oh, okay, so it's in addition to
Yes.
the general ed, that particular student, even though it's an FTE and not an actual human, the FTE gets an additional funding for being categorized as special ed. Okay.
They basically get counted twice. Because the reality is they should be getting both services. Okay. So they should be funded for both.
They are general education students who receive special education services up to 13.5%.
But those dollar amounts just come out of the legislature. They create the formula that uses.
Just a quick question on process here. You have more to your presentation, yes? No?
The budget, no.
Okay.
That's all I had planned to cover unless you want me to cover more.
No, we've gone over this budget
Yes,
a
we
number
did.
of times now, and I appreciate your willingness and eagerness, it seems at times, to go over it again and again, and especially to cut it down so short for this meeting, while still hitting all the cogent points. In fact, I heard the answers to several of our questions that we had at the workshop in this cut down version. So I really appreciated that. So at this point, I would say if there are no more questions from the board, I will suspend the business meeting and open this up to the public hearing. If there are questions specifically about the budget from the public, now is the time to ask them. If you have questions on other issues, please, or not quite, if you have comments on other issues, please save them for the public comments section.
I have one more question before we open it
Please.
up. Is there a minimum required fund balance? I'm thinking, looking at the projection years, it dwindles.
Yes.
Is there a point where we say, well, we can't draw down from it any further?
There is a board policy that requires me to budget a 6% fund balance each year. So at the point we get to, say, a $20 million budget, 6% of that is $1.2 million. So I have to make sure that the budget has $1.2 million that budget process.
Thank you.
I just wanted to thank everyone present, but especially you, Mr. Pullman, for the presentation that I missed on July 13th. I was able to watch the recording and I was able to have my questions answered through the combination of that recording and this evening's presentation. Thank you.
So if there are any folks on Zoom who have questions, please use the Q&A function and just put in your first and last name and location, and that will let us know you have a question, and we will know to wait for you to type it in. If anyone present has a question, now, let's get you a mic real quick. Or actually, if you want to come up here to the front, we've got a mic right up here. Name and location to start, please.
Okay. Bill Carruthers Clinton, largely out of ignorance on my part, so bear with me. You mentioned investment earnings. What do we have invested? Do we invest in money market, so forth? What do we do?
So the Island County Treasurer is our bank. So we deposit all our revenue in there. We send our checks for, to them. And then anything that we have, which is our fund balance basically, is invested in Island County Treasury pool. So it's basically, I don't know what they invest in, but it's probably money market. It's a low percentage. Traditionally, it's been like a 0.25%. So it's kind of what you get at the bank when you leave your money in a market or something like that. So we don't invest. It's the treasurer at the Island County that does it, but it's not in the stock market or anything like that.
Okay.
It's a very safe, guaranteed type of investment.
Okay, thanks. You mentioned ESSER funds and you're going to lose those. What is that?
Yeah. So because of the pandemic, the federal government has allocated very large amount of money to a lot of organizations across the country to help them get through the pandemic. So ESSER funds, there's several varieties of those, but it was money that the district has received, and I think we have about 5 different grants in varying dollar amounts that were to help remediate the effects of the pandemics. So whether it's money for smaller class sizes this year, knowing that kids would need more support because they'd been out of a classroom for a year, or we bought big those HEPA filters. There's one in this room for every classroom to help improve the air quality. Supplies for testing for COVID, just a variety of different purposes. But that's what the ESSER funds are basically for.
So that's lasted for what, 2 years or 3?
Yeah, it's been about 2.5.
So it stands for the American Rescue Plan Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund.
Ah.
So the acronym is ARP ESSER funds.
Yeah.
And they have to be spent within a certain period of time. So you can't bank them in your fund balance. So that's why they're being used just over the course of these 3 years. And that's why we couldn't use them to extend, for instance, additional teacher contracts longer, because they have to be spent within a certain amount of time
Okay.
and on a certain subset of items.
Correct.
Okay. And you said, or in your report, you said that teacher salaries are 42%.
Yes.
That doesn't include benefits though, right?
Correct. It does not.
If you included all benefits, what percentage are teachers' salaries benefits of the entire budget?
Just teachers or teachers and other staff?
Te-
Because I was looking
What
over
did
that.
you use as a criteria when you did the 42%?
42% are certificated instructional staff. Benefits are 24% of our total budget. And certificated instructional staff is about twice as large as our classified staff in dollar amounts. So if you divide that by 3, it's probably 16%. So you're probably at 58% for the certificated staff. And
Hmm.
total salary and benefits are usually around 86%.
Teachers and associates?
Everybody.
Yeah,
Yeah.
everybody. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Thank you. I actually didn't know that investment question, so that was a valuable learning experience for me too. Thank you. We have a question here from Aloha Clyde in Clinton. I saw an expense item for $1 million for the community center. What does this cover? And is this the net cost after rent, net cost after rents, et cetera? Do it take into account the Southaby Community Center fundraising for heat pumps, garden, et cetera?
Okay, it has nothing to do with the heat pumps. It has nothing to do with rent. It is a retrofit of the gymnasium, a seismic retrofit. We received a grant from the federal government for roughly $975,000 to pay for it. But because of cost overruns based on today's climate, it's $1,150,000 to do that work. And it's currently being done and should be done by October. So it's really independent of the community center itself. It's something that we started while we were still in the building, the process as a school.
And this was the work that we talked about. I think it was like 4 or 5 months back where we as a board made a decision to move forward with the cost, even though it exceeded the amount of the grant because of the necessity of getting the work done. And if we didn't cover the balance, then we would lose access to the grant funds.
Correct.
And Aloha Clyde has a follow-up. So is it net for Southaby School District?
No, we are actually, because of the current construction environment, we are actually, spending some money of our own money to finish the project.
If anyone else online is working on a question, please just drop your name and location into the Q&A just so we know. We have no other questions in the queue right now. If there are any questions on the budget or speaking for or against any item in the budget, now is the time to do so. Hearing and seeing nothing else, we will close the budget hearing and move back to our business meeting. Thank you, Mr. Pullman. We'll move on to the consent agenda. Are there any objections to approving the consent agenda as presented? Hearing none, the consent agenda is approved as presented. We'll now move on to public comments. If you would like to make a public comment, please let Mrs. McCarron know, or if you are on our Zoom, please enter your name and location into the Q&A function so we know that you're typing up a longer comment. Okay. Rose.
Good evening. I live on 6529 Four Sisters Road, 2 miles south of the intersection on Maxwellton Road. My name is Rufus Rose. I attended a meeting up in the ESD on the 28th of June called, put on by Common Goodness Project. It was about safety and belonging for LGBTQ plus youth and race. And I found it very interesting. I'm curious, is that a program this district has had? And whether we did or not, I thought it might be interesting for the district to consider sponsoring a similar thing. This was an all-day deal. And they fed us. I'm not sure where the money came from, that sandwiches and cookies and stuff like that. But it was interesting. And because of the controversy that has raged down here for quite a bit about that kind of stuff, it just seems logical to me that we would go out of our way to present something like this for the general public's consumption. I don't know how, I'm guessing there were 50 plus people at the meeting I attended. I qualified to go because of my involvement, talking to the kids in the detention center up there. When they're up there. At any rate, I just seemed to me like being aware of, and this is for the, let me see, Island, Snohomish, Skagit, Watchum, and San Juan counties were represented there. It's what's going on in our district, in this regional district of education. So it seemed logical to me that it would be the kind of thing that the board would look into and sponsor. I don't know what the cost involved is. I'm sure there is some. I had a couple of other things. Looking on the new, I don't even know what you call it yet, but the new thing the school district puts out about what you're doing in the summer. And I became aware of something called SORA, which is with the library, where there's a reading list that students are encouraged to check in somehow. And I'm wondering if the students who do that get credit for it. Is that some kind of thing that a student can pump up not only their individual knowledge, but their accounted for education in the school district? Seems like it might be a good idea to encourage students to pump their grades up by participating in this thing. And maybe that's why it's in the information that goes out. I don't know if parents are aware of this or how they are made aware of it. But when my kids were in school here, I think I would have pretty sure I would have encouraged them to participate in a thing like that. So they'd have an advantage, or they would advantage themselves with the curriculum that is anticipated, whatever grade level they're in. Parent Square, I became aware of, and is that for parents only? On the website that I got this information about the SORA, I also saw that there was the ability to link to a Growing Great Kids was the title of the thing. And so it's linked to the school district somehow. And in it was I'm old, and so I don't know much about this kind of stuff, VMO. And there was a lecturer there. And my question about that is, because it's linked to the district, does the district have any ability or authority to monitor or approve of or disapprove of whatever is linked on that website? That's my question. Several questions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for sharing the suggestions.
Brooke, may I add a quick response? Wait a moment. Thank you. Mr. Rose, I just wanted to let you know that if you'd like some of those questions to be answered more specifically, an email would be a great way to reach us, since this is a comment section of this meeting. Just so that you can get those answers you were asking for at another time. Thank you. Oh, I just wanted you to know that reaching out by email would support us in being able to answer your questions.
Okay, my understanding, I'm happy to do that. And thank you for that encouragement. My understanding about the meetings is this is available to everybody, not just you folks here on the board, but whoever's listening in and can check the
Absolutely.
stuff. So, and I guess I'm happy to send the email, and thank you for that. But I guess other folks wouldn't know about it if I did that.
Sure. Yeah, it's great that the community was able to hear your questions, and we can get back to you via email because of the format of this meeting.
Because, yeah, sorry. It's because during the business meetings, it's time for public comment, not for a
Hard to
discussion.
understand what you're saying.
During these business meetings, it's a time for public comment to the board rather than to engage in a discussion. The workshops are the opportunities for those discussions on specific agenda items. Questions, we've done one so far. We're planning to do future ones as well to gather frequently asked questions and present the answers to the community. We're just trying, because these meetings are indeed for the board. Others are welcome to come and join and to comment, but it's not to engage in a discussion with the public during the boards. It's to get business done for the school board.
Oh, yeah, and of course, my reason for being here is to encourage discussions with the public. And so I was here 2 weeks ago and couldn't speak because of what it was a different kind of meeting. And so is there some way an old guy like I am, the public, gets to be on the agenda, these issues, so that they can be discussed because they're on the agenda? If they're not on the agenda, they can't be discussed.
So the way to get an item on the agenda to be discussed at a board workshop is to suggest it or request it either via email or during the public comment period. And then we'll look at it for the next board workshop. And if the board decides that they want to have that agenda item on the agenda, we will put it on the agenda for the next board workshop.
So there's about a month from the idea to the possibility of being on an agenda where it could be discussed.
2 weeks.
Brooke, respectfully, I would like to just acknowledge that at this point, we're entering into
Yes.
back and forth and conversation, which is,
I can go over the complete rundown of how that works after the meeting with you if you'd like. But I agree. Thank you, Andrea, for the reminder of our goal 2. At this point, we'll be moving on to our new business. And I will run through the method with which the cadence of that with you in private after the meeting.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll now move on to new business. The first item is Memorandum 2122-57, Resolution number 666. Resolution to transfer from the Capital Projects Fund to the Debt Service Fund. We're open for discussion among the board at this point. This is something that Mr. Pullman mentioned in his presentation, just the standard passing it along. Is there any comments, questions, considerations?
Just to be clear, is this specifically about the community center retrofit? Or is this is more of a run-of-the-mill fund allocation?
Yes, this is moving money from the Capital Project Fund to the Debt Service Fund to get the second to last payment. Mr. Pullman, correct me if I'm wrong on any of these things. Second to last payment on a bond that we made a while back. So we're paying it off now.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Okay, all those in favor of approving Memorandum 2122-57, Resolution number 666, resolution to transfer from the Capital Projects Fund to the Debt Service Fund, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say nay. The resolution is approved. Memorandum 2122-58, resolution number 667, approval of the 2022 to 2023 budget. We've been talking this over for a while. Is there any additional discussion to be had? Okay. All those in favor of approving Memorandum 2122-58, resolution number 667, approval of the 2022-2023 budget, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say nay. The memorandum, the resolution has been approved. Memorandum 2122-59, approval of change orders for the Langley Middle School gym retrofit project. This is the other item that Mr. Pullman mentioned. Is there anything that you'd like to add, Dr. Moshe, to this, or anything any board members feel they need more information on this one?
I just want to make sure this doesn't continue to happen. I understand that this happens, especially in our inflationary current system that are times we find ourselves in, but is there any guarantee that comes with the request for more money that they will not continue to request more?
Yeah, I can answer this. This is a little different than that. And what this is as we are going through the project, we will come upon a situation that was unknown in the bidding process. And currently we're having them remove a hood in what used to be the old kitchen because it needs to be removed in order to do some of the work that has to be done. And we've decided that we would like to have them take it and it's like $1,500, take it out and get rid of it for us. So we wouldn't do that personally. So this is change orders. So it's only if something happens that is different than the bid itself as we go through the project. Don't expect a lot of those, but you will find that it happens from time to time. You open a wall up and all of a sudden you find mold in it or whatever it might be that has to be remedied. So that's what this is really about. It gives the superintendent the ability to pay those bills because otherwise we'd bring them back to you one at a time. And it'd be a 2-month process before the contractor would get paid for work. But usually it's very small items. The one I have on
and
my desk is about $1,500.
Typically, we build in a 10% contingency, and this did not have that option in the RFP process. So this essentially puts that into place.
So from a business perspective, this is a change of scope.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
exactly what it is.
Any other comments, questions from the board?
I would just add that I think in the given current times, the 10% contingency is on the slim side. And I hope that the team feels that it's sufficient to meet the arising needs. I'm curious, does 10% feel sufficient to meet the likely arising needs?
I do, because this isn't really about, changes in material cost or labor costs. We have a bid for the work. This is when we run into things that were unknown at the time. Most of the demolition is done, so they found very little in there. But this is for additional scope of work that is added as we move along. It's usually something the district wants to have done while they're in there doing work. It's much less expensive to have it done while a contractor is in the building than it is to bring somebody in at some other time.
Very good, thank you.
Exactly what Andrew was mentioning about the charging stations. It being cheaper to have someone do it when they're there. Maybe. Not seeing any other comments or questions. So all those in favor of approving memorandum 2122-59, approval of change orders for the Langley Middle School gym retrofit project, please say aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Any opposed, please say nay. The change orders have been approved. The last item on our agenda tonight, the last new business item on our agenda tonight, memorandum 2122-60, approval to increase the current credit card limit from $25,000 to $45,000. You want to address this, Dr. Moshe?
I do. This essentially does not change our spending. We have a practice around spending. What this allows us to do is to use the credit card beyond its current limit. And the board actually experienced the limit on the credit card when we go off to a conference and we put the rooms on the credit card and the other expenses, we go beyond that limit because the superintendent's limit on a credit card was 10. The other card had 10, and there was $5 $5,000 that could go either way for a total of 25. We've applied to the bank to allow that limit to go up to 45, and it requires the board to approve that option. But once again, we have the checks and balances in place for the expenditures themselves. This is merely to increase the credit line on the credit card.
And is there any additional cost to that, to the district?
No, it's not going to increase any costs. It's just, again, where we can spend it, namely on the credit card versus through a PO process.
Sorry, I meant more like an annual fee or anything like that, but I don't know how the
No,
district credit
no,
card
it doesn't
works.
change that. This is through Heritage Bank
Excellent,
without a fee. No.
excellent.
Does the district ever carry a balance on its credit card?
No, we pay it in full every month.
Okay, all those in favor of approving memorandum 2122-60, approval to increase the current credit card limit from 25,000 to 45,000, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say nay. The increase has been approved. That concludes our new business. We'll move on to reports. Mr. Pluman, the financial and enrollment report.
Well, the good thing is we don't talk about enrollment anymore because that was done as of June 1st. So that is decided. So this is a report as of June 30th. And again, we're on a fiscal year that runs through August. So this is the 10th of our 12th month. So at 83.33% of the way through the year, our revenues at about 82.45, expenditures a little less than 82. But you can see, even though the expenditures are less as a percentage, they're greater as a dollar amount. And that's because it's a percentage of budget and we budgeted to spend more. So you understand that. And then the bottom part is just a breakdown of revenue by month, expenditure by month. You can see on the revenue side, a little bit of a jump in June or May, actually, and that was because of a federal payment, that enrollment, which you'll see at some point. And then the expenditures. And if you have questions, I'm going to go through it pretty quickly unless you have questions, stop me. So you can see where our salaries and benefits, 3 on the left, are the biggest part of where we spend our funds. And then you'll see that, certificated salaries and benefits have risen. When you look at classified salaries, it wasn't really that there was a big jump this year from last year. It's that last year classified salaries were less because classified employees didn't work as much actually on site, and they are hourly employees. But if you look at the right side, you can see that our salary and benefits as of this month are about 86% of our budget. And it gives you that big picture breakdown of the certificated classified employee benefits. We look at it with encumbrances. We are at about 97.24% or 21,717,000. Again, payroll is at almost 100%, and it should be because we are almost through the year because it includes all contract encumbrances. We don't have any more extra time for most people this time of the year because a lot of our staff are off for the summer. The non-employee costs a little lower, but some of that is ESSER funds that we had budgeted knowing we weren't going to spend those funds in the current year. So that's why that one looks smaller. And if you look at fund balance, you see that it started to drop. We started higher in September than last year. And then we received that payment that we will actually be spending next year, which caused our fund balance to jump up artificially in May. But again, we will still end up below where we were in the previous year. Budget status report is just a breakdown of revenue and expenditures. You'll see that we have collected $17,759,402. We have spent $18,206,983, and we have a current fund balance of about $4.7 million. Balance sheet, just another way of looking at the same information, but it's just your assets and your liabilities and comes down to the same dollar amount at the bottom. The other funds, capital projects, currently has about $2.8 million in there. Debt service has $920. There's no payment until next December in that one. ASB has close to $70,000, which is a big improvement over the year. Transportation vehicle fund, $462, won't get a payment until August. That's when we get it. Private trust fund, which is for student scholarships, stays at about $789,000 because the majority of that is principal that cannot be used. We can only spend. Any questions on the financial?
I think as much as we like you, we're probably eyes glazing over after the last 2 meetings. But no,
You are.
No comments or questions here. Yeah, thank you. I'll turn it over to Dr. Mosher for the superintendent's report.
Superintendent's report will be brief. School's been out for a month. I do want to let the board and the public know about upcoming events. August 10th, we have a workshop, and I will be talking with the board about the use of our facilities coming up 23 school year, 22, 23 use, and then what I anticipate for 23 and beyond. There will be a public meeting, conversation on that same topic a week later on the 17th. And then hopefully the board will give us some direction at their meeting at the end of August. So that's really what we're working on right now. We start back next week. Administrators come back and we start to creep open our doors towards the next school year. So for right now, that's all I have.
Joe, point of clarification, you said August 10th.
Did I
said-
misspeak?
You
It's
said
the,
workshop or do we have a retreat?
no, it's just a workshop.
Just a workshop. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. You stole a little bit of my thunder. I was going to talk
Sorry.
about the meeting, but no, you had all the details right there. I just wanted to note that we've actually been, because we've been working so well on the tactical issues, we've been able to set aside August to look strategically at the school district. I mean, we try to do that year round, but a particular focused look to really emphasize that during August. I'm really excited about that. Both for the workshop to hear your thoughts, to sit with the community and talk about their thoughts, and then make some decisions and point the school district forward. Just like the superintendent's report, usually we would have a student report here, but our student representatives are enjoying summer, and we are glad that they are doing so. We will move on to board comments or report. Anything from board members? Apparently, we're all enjoying summer also.
I will just say again, how grateful I am for the astounding communication skills that you bring to your role in communicating to us about this budget process, and also just to your incredibly wise stewardship, the way you two collaborate to lead this district around the numbers and the money, but also the values and the education and the impact. It's astonishing what a great job you continue to do and how you translate your work into digestible pieces for those of us sitting up here and also for our public. Thank you.
All right, then I will declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you all.